Welcome to the training, learning, and development community. Thanks for checking out this broadcast. Today, we have a very special broadcast with Alan Natachu. We're doing the accessibility playlist. We're getting back into that series again. We've had some great episodes so far. I think we've got, 2 or 3 of them. We've still got one more next month, one more episode. But I'm really glad today to have, this Friday, to have Alan speaking with us about accessibility and fonts and colors, which I'm totally interested in right now, and very excited to have him share his accessibility tips about that. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask is, every time that you messaged me about accessibility, you had that, I think it was A11Y or pound sign A11Y, which I had never seen before. Yeah, exactly. Can you explain that a little bit?
That's the hashtag for accessibility. If you're on Twitter, if you're doing online searches, if you enter that, that will get you more resources on accessibility. It's to shorten the word accessibility. Accessibility is 13 letters, I believe. So if you take out the middle 11, shrink it down, hashtag A11Y. So it's rather than taking this huge 14-character word for social media and condensing it down to 5.
Oh, I love it. Okay, that's good to know. That's very good to know. And that's the first time that I've heard that. Excellent. All right, and I'm going to give a shout out to some of the folks that are popping in this morning. Shakira, Kanisha, John. I saw Helena was in for a little bit there. So yeah, I'm just going to let you take it away, Alan. Thank you so much for doing this morning.
All right, thank you. I am super psyched about doing this. I love talking about accessibility and I love sharing about accessibility. And as I was thinking about how I could better serve the L&D community, I like to keep things kind of basic, kind of at the ground level. So I decided to talk a little bit about font and color. Let's see, sharing my screen. So this is my screen. What we designed for L&D when we start working with documents, when we start working in video, it doesn't matter what, color is always going to be there. And when we talk about color, when we use color, we got to think about not only the color choice, but the contrast choice. And contrast is the ability to see from one color to another, at least in the case of L&D. I have 3 squares on the screen. The square on the far left, that has poor color contrast. It says 1A in the box, and it's in a very light gray box, versus the one on the right. It has a solid black background, solid white text. You can read that easily. You can see that easily. It's very easy to see, okay, the one on the left doesn't work for me, the one on the right does. But in the age that we live in, we have access to millions of colors. So it's kind of hard to see, okay, which one of these squares is accessible, can be read, can be seen clearly, not only to people who have regular vision, but people who may have a vision deficiency, and which ones are not. If you think that gets a little complicated, things get a little bit more complicated when we start going into color. Now, I found this picture on Wikimedia Commons, and I love this picture. It's a long exposure of a Ferris wheel turning. I believe it's in Seattle, Washington. Now, I have normal vision. I do wear corrective glasses, and I have astigmatism. But when I wear the glasses, I can see this image very cleanly. When I have, maybe I don't have such good eyesight. What happens to this image if I can't see colors clearly? Maybe the colors are muted. Maybe they're not quite on par with the original image. Like this one, it has kind of a gray overlay over the entire thing. As people's eyes get older, they may not see color clearly anymore. Or if I just take off my glasses, that brightly colored picture will look like this. Some people, because of their eyesight accessibility, because of what they see and they need help with, they will require to change colors on their monitors. When we think about accessibility, when we think about colors and accessibility, a lot of the topic goes to color blindness. A lot of the topic goes into, what colors can I use? But with our devices, be it computer, mobile device, or whatever, with our different devices, we have the ability to change what we see. Sometimes I'll flip things in grayscale mode, just so I can see white text better on a black background. So what happens to your colors if someone does that grayscale mode? Will they be able to see and understand what you're trying to convey? In addition to grayscale mode, some devices have what's called warm light mode. There's this theory that the blue light emitted from the computers, from the mobile devices, is harmful to our sleep patterns. And if we warm up that light, add a little yellow to it, that will help us go to sleep better. There are other people who could explain that theory much better than I can. But when we enter that kind of mode, that kind of warm shift mode, that nighttime mode, on our devices, things do not appear like the original image. In this particular slide, on the left-hand side, we got the picture that's in a slightly yellow cast, whereas on the right-hand side, that's the original picture. The left-hand side would be how I would look at this picture on my phone after 11 p.m. And because of our devices, the different devices that we have the ability to switch what we see. There's a big push right now for dark mode, whereas you got a dark background with white text, and everything else is kind of flipped towards being read in the dark or with a dark background. So what does this all mean? There's so many variables outside of color blindness, outside of vision impairment. We now have to think about devices. What can we do to help us manage this? What can we do to figure out, okay, will this color work for me? Now, this is a list of different color checkers, as well as a link to a history and a breakdown of color and contrast. Let's see, will it let me go to the link? Yes. Now, this first website, contrastchecker.com, I really like because it allows you to enter the foreground color and the background color. Let me go back to my presentation. And let me grab this number. Whoops. There we go. Now, this number is important to us because it allows us to get an accurate color reading. You may have heard of web colors or hex colors. It's a code that the computer understands to bring up a certain color. This particular code will bring up this gray. Now, if I enter that as my foreground color, and then check it, it tells me, okay, it doesn't pass this guideline. It doesn't pass this guideline. And as you hover over each red circle, it tells you, okay, it doesn't pass because of this. WCAG is a set of standards for accessibility, and there's a whole checklist of what makes something visible, how big something is. Now, I like this particular contrast checker because, let me get the hex code off of here and put that in here. So we enter. I like this checker because, well, it gives me a quick check to see if it will pass or not. But it also has this grayscale button. I hit the grayscale button. It changes the color into black and white. So it tells me whether or not it would still pass or fail based on the grayscale color. And if you don't know the color that you want to use, you don't have that hex color, you can click on the color palette here and choose, okay, I want something with a blue, but a little dark blue. And as you move your color picker around, it will show you immediately where things are at, if it's pass or if it doesn't pass. And then I'm going to hit the grayscale button again. You get to see, okay, this looks very solid if someone's to look at this as a grayscale image or if they have grayscale turned on their computer. The next one is this one. It's a contrast checker with color alternatives. If you're looking to use a certain color, but if it doesn't pass, you can receive advice on which colors would pass. My background color is E. My text color is this color. As you can see, I was playing around with this earlier. And it tells me that as it stands, it will fail the basic accessibility guidelines for color contrast. In the middle, it says it passes if you change the background to this color or this color. Text color or background color is this. And if you choose a color that works well, it will tell you right away, boom, you're good to go. But if you don't have a color that's good to go, it will give you an alternative to use. Sometimes you just want to check. This is a nice little tool, colorsafe.co. And all you got to do is check your background color. Has a nice little color picker. You get to choose what fonts you want to use, font size, and then it will generate a color palette for you. And then you go through the steps and choose a color palette. I like this because it's a very easy tool to use, and it's a very easy tool if you don't know what colors you are looking for. The previous two tools, we knew the color, we knew what we wanted, or we had an idea of what we wanted. This will help you decide on different color palettes if you don't know where to start. Now, I've been talking a lot about color and contrast. Well, what does that mean? Why do we do what we do? AIM, Web Accessibility in Mind, has a great breakdown of contrast and color accessibility. I know I only got a limited time here, so I won't go through the entire thing, but if this is a decent read, it's about 10-15 minutes long on explaining why color works and why color doesn't work. Now, we're going to switch little gears. We're going to be talking about fonts. I like to keep things simple. I like to keep things at a base level because sometimes we'll get into way big things like screen readers, like keyboard navigation. That's great, but we also should have a foundation of the basics. And one of the basics is trying to decide what fonts to use. When you use a font, they come in two main flavors. There's something called serif and non-serif font. Serif font is like Times New Roman, and it has what I like to call little things. Put that in quotes here. And those little things are these little accents at the ends of the letter. Non-serif fonts are like Arial, Helvetica, and they offer no little extras at the tips of their letters. Why is that important to know? For a long time, when we were still doing print, serif fonts were considered easier to read on print. But as we move from print to computer into mobile device, the choice now is non-serif because it's easier to read on those devices. I personally like to use non-serif fonts because it reaches more people, it reaches a lot more devices, and it still looks good if you were to print out that particular document or do a screenshot or print out a screenshot. Now, font size is important too. I got 3 different font sizes here. Very, very teeny tiny font. That's 12 font, 12-point font. That's good for documents. Not so good for presenting online or presenting in front of a crowd on a projector. It's very hard to read. The minimum font size for screen is 18 point. That's the minimum it needs to be so that it can be read from a reasonable distance. If you can go bigger, go for it, because bigger is better in terms of font size. And what fonts did you use? There's some great fonts that are built into your system that you can use right away, such as Arial. That's both on PC and Mac. I'm going to butcher this name, Calibri. That's available if you have Microsoft Office installed on your machine. Toma. This one is a difficult choice for me to say because as a designer, I do not like the font, but from an accessibility standpoint, it is fantastic, and that is Comic Sans. One thing I did not touch in this particular talk is dyslexia. Comic Sans has enough variation in each letters that it makes it easier for someone with dyslexia to read. Now, I personally don't like it for design, but I do have respect for it because it is an accessible font. Helvetica, that's a widely popular one. If you use Google Fonts, you can use Muli, Rubato, Lato, and Open Sans. These fonts, a lot of these fonts are free, easy to use, and if you go from one device to another, they will be read from one device to another. All right. So that was my quick little spiel. Other fonts that have, so I'm going to answer some questions on the chat. Kim asks, are there other fonts that have that uniqueness? Yes, there is. I'm going to do a quick Google search for dyslexic font. If I could spell that right, we will be in business. There are 2 versions of this particular font. There is a paid font and there's a free font. I'm going to drop that into the chat. And when you visit these pages, it tells you why it is good. There's a font called Dyslexie. And where's the next one? Where's the free one? I can't find, oh, Open Dyslexic. That's another one. Those would be 2 other fonts if you're working with someone who has dyslexia. And there is a way to install these fonts not only on your computers, but on your mobile devices. I don't know how to do that right off the top of my head, but you can install it so it can be a system font. And let me see if there's any other questions here.
Hey, Alan, I got a bunch of questions for you. Actually, is it okay if I
All
ask
right.
you directly so I can?
It's
So,
been a while. I forget how this works.
right, right. So I'm just curious, why did accessibility become important to you? Like, how did you get into it exactly?
Oh, as I started learning more about L&D, more about teaching and working in higher ed, it's kind of like the perfect storm of realizing, okay, I need to do more to make sure that my content reaches as many people as possible. Some people talk about accessibility reaching everybody. Well, that is true to a sense, but there may be some people who won't be able to read your content or won't be able to access your content because it's not in a certain format or something else that's beyond our control. So when I design or when I put something together, I always think about, okay, what's the maximum amount of people I can help with what I'm doing?
Yeah, no, that says a lot about you because I think there's a certain level of digital empathy that you have to, to want to take on making sure that your content is accessible and I'm not surprised that you just seem like your personality, just knowing you that this is something that you'd be really, really good at. Um, so in your current role now, how often do you have to consider using, like accessibility in the stuff that you produce?
I switched from higher ed to corporate, and I still bring that accessibility mindset. I find that my turnaround on projects is slowed down a little bit because there's a lot of projects that I work on, and I'm always like, well, what about subtitles? What about changing the font? What about this? So in my work, it's always like, okay, I have to do this because this is the right thing to do.
Right.
And I'm on board with an LED team who says, yes, it's the right thing to do. So let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, that's great because it seems like you would be bringing a great deal of value to the organization by maintaining sort of some standards in that regard. Because I've worked with different L&D teams, and accessibility was always kind of an afterthought. Or if somebody else brought it up, oh, we got an email that this content isn't right, and it's not accessible, and it's just an afterthought. So it seems the importance of this topic overall, it's like it should be top of mind from the get go. It, obviously, it seems like that's something that you would bring to any kind of project. All
Yeah,
right.
and investing 2 3 hours more on a project will save you triple that if something comes back and you need to retrofit it for accessibility.
Right. Um, so how about this one? What do you say to designers that feel limited by complying to accessibility standards?
I am All right, a little bit background about me. Before I went into L&D, I was an artist and I was into video, but I was also very broke. So in terms of resources that I had, I was very limited to what I had access to. And what I had access to, I had to maximize that. Um, so when it comes to being limited, I'm like, okay, let's work with this. I have this tool, I have this color palette, I have this font. What can I do to make it look good? What can I do to make it work?
Mhm.
I'm big on mobile devices, and I really want to upgrade my iPhone. I'm iPhone 6S, but it's still rocking, and it still does everything that I need it to do. I'm very jealous of the new SE, though. Uh, but I know that I can still do everything I need to do on my device and don't need to move on just yet. With limitations, that's actually a good thing because you get to learn, okay, I can do this within this product. Okay, I can use this setup and it will look good consistently. So
Right.
rather than thinking of it as a limitation, um, I like to think of it more as an opportunity, as a
Wow.
chance to grow.
Have you had like many conversations with other designers about this and how integrating accessibility into the builds that they do? Like, I mean, do you ever run into resistance at all?
A lot of open ears, not necessarily resistance, at least not face to face or any other communication. It's
Mm-hmm.
always been like, oh, that's a great idea, or oh, I'm on board.
Awesome. Um, and I've got one more question here. How can you communicate the importance of accessibility to your team or to your organization?
Money talks. Not only coming from a higher ed world, there's always the threat of being sued about not having content accessible.
Right.
Um, in this day and age, so you can always go that route. I like to say, well, if someone comes in and they complain that we're not providing, um, what's the word? I'm having a total brain. If we're not providing access, proper access to the tools that they need to work, and that may get the ball rolling. Sometimes it's a matter of taking care of a few projects and incorporating that accessibility into those projects and say, hey, we can do this. This only took like an extra 15 minutes, or oh, it only added an hour and a half to my work time. And look, it reaches a lot more people. It meets these standards, and it's something that will save the company more money in the long run because we don't have to go back and retrofit and retrofit and retrofit.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, Kim. Accommodation.
I've definitely seen that retrofit sort of activity in the past. Um, when you started getting into building, um, accessibility into your projects, were there any particular models or anything that you were using? Anybody that you might have used as inspiration?
Um, I like this book. It's called Steal Like an Artist. And um,
Austin
it's not,
Kleon?
yes, it's not about accessibility, but it gives me the mind frame of how to look at something and how to copy that. So if I do see something, I'm like, okay, how did they do that? How can I recreate it?
I love it. Yeah, like Kara says here, stitching time saves 9. Pre-prep is always better than scrambling to meet user needs.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree. And I love that reference to Austin Kleon. I'm a big fan of his. Just weekly, his newsletter. He's really fantastic. I should probably put a link in chat for it because it's great. It's inspirational stuff. It's awesome. Okay, so I'm sort of just gonna throw this out there. It might be a little bit random, but I want to know because you're a big Apple fan, and this was sort of a discussion we were having recently about learning experience. So, and like basically it comes from the whole marketing experience thing where, um, we were actually talking about this yesterday, where when you buy an Apple product, there is an entire experience that goes along with it. Not just like the purchase, but then the unboxing and then the revealing of the product and opening it up and getting it started and all that. That's the whole thing. Do you see like accessibility built into those experiences? Like, and from the Apple side of things, as like exquisite as their design sensibilities are, do you notice whether or not their content is accessible, has accessibility built into it from the get-go?
From the get-go. All right, going from the unboxing. Um, it's been a while since I opened a new Apple product, so I'm going from memory.
Yeah, you're still running that 6S, so
Let's see. So you get the box. Has a nice weight to it, and then when you open it up, there's very little friction. There's not like a air suck, like a vacuum. It kind of comes up with a little force, but it's not like you need super force to open it up. And when you open it up, everything's compartmentalized. Um, so you're able to see, okay, this is that. And when you remove the cables and the device, there's usually another box. And inside there's a little pinchy. And underneath that, there's your documentation for that device. Everything's kind of laid out in a linear fashion, taking you through the experience. When you turn on the device, it will take you through the setup, but there's also the built-in accessibility factor to it, especially with Mac computers. You can turn on VoiceOver, and then you can turn on different accessibility features right from the start. On the iPhone, I believe you can, but I haven't set up an iPhone from to factory in a while. So I don't remember that. And then when you get into the programs, they're spending a lot of time going into incorporating accessibility into the operating system and into the different programs, especially the ones that Apple produces. And they often have spotlights on different applications, not only for the Mac, but for the mobile devices that feature accessibility, not only in terms of what we do, but general lifestyle accessibility apps.
Wow, I was totally entertained how you were physically going through that in your head. It's it's pretty amazing. Now, so I guess my question is for learning experience,
Mhm.
is there a model for that? Is that something that people try to take on as well? Like like when you're building out a course or something,
Mhm.
is that do people consider like, just having that level of quality as far as, the unboxing experience?
You know what? I don't know. That's a great question.
Mm,
I've been doing accessibility from the standpoint as an individual contributor and not necessarily as a team. And I've been picking up things here and there. So I don't, even though I carry not a lot of knowledge, it has been kind of hodgepodge together
right.
on the topic. And I don't know of any resources off the top of my head where it's kind of like a general, okay, um, ecosystem of accessibility, for lack of a better.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I think just the shift going from just being builders of content or, distributing content or managers of content versus now, the trend of people being a learning experience designer and such. I'm just curious as to like how many people are actually like how they're considering the experience overall. And I'm probably going to keep asking questions about that from everybody that comes onto uh, onto TLDC. Um, yeah, so this is great, Alan. Thank you so much for sharing that. If there's any possibility at all, I did try to take down some of the links that you had posted, like for WebAIM and accessiblecolors.com. And then there was the other one I actually posted it in chat. Oh, perfect. Yeah, color safe. I would love to be able to put those into the show notes. And other than that, it's great to see you. Miss you. Haven't seen you in a while. Um, we'll, we'll keep hitting you up for stuff. I always love it when you come onto TLD Cast and share some of your vast knowledge. And yeah, have a great weekend. And thanks everybody for popping into the live show. I'll have this one. I'll probably be posting this one like really early today because I'm going on a trip. And so thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thanks everyone. Bye.